It's 5:01. I'm going to go ahead and call the Historic Marker Committee of the Forsyth County Historic Resources Commission meeting to order. Thank you, everybody, for being here. All right. Okay. First, I'm just going to go alphabetically through our committee members to take attendance. So please, if y'all could unmute yourselves and answer as present when I call your names. Khaki Berry.
Here.
Cheryl Harry. I know you're here, Cheryl.
Here. Here.
Alana Meltzer-Holderfield.
Here.
Leanne Pegram.
Here.
Janet Schill.
Present.
Artie Sparrow.
Here.
And Sarah Thompson. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so at this time, I see I'm going to.
Heather, did you get a yes from Sarah? Is she here?
No, she never responded, so I did not expect her to be.
Okay.
At this time, I'm going to list the applicants or the people that I see here for each of the applications. So if I do not call your name, please unmute yourself and let us know that you're here and which application you are here for. Okay, Faye Hooser Price for Dr. Charlie Brady Hooser. I have Gloria Ford for James and Parthenia Ford. I have Martha Hartley and Barbara Morris for St. Phillips Moravian Church. The origin location, I have Gerald McCoy for St. Benedict the Moor. I have JP Beatty, Artesia Bohannon, and Phil Archer for Alta Vista. And then Spencer McCall for Waughtown Freedmen School. And did I hear somebody else just come in or no?
Yes, this is.
Oh, hi, Pat. Yes.
Hi, how
Good.
are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
All right. Okay, so we are.
Vista.
I'm sorry.
Brenda Miller Galloway with Alta Vista.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So at this point, I believe we are missing the applicants for Ephesus Junior Academy and Centerville National Register Historic District. So if they come in at some point in the meeting, we'll skip over them in the agenda and then we can come back to their presentations as needed. All right, the first order of business is to elect a committee chair. We have received a nomination for Leanne Pegram to take the role of committee chair. Are there any other nominations from our committee members? Okay, hearing none, then can I ask one of our committee members for a motion?
Move that Leanne Pegram be named chair of our committee.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oops.
Opposed? All right. Congratulations. Wow. Congratulations, Leanne.
Ooh, what prizes do I get?
I wish I had a gavel for you, but I don't.
Oh, well.
I see JD Wilson that you have just joined as well, which I assume you're here for Alta Vista, since we have your letter of support. Welcome. Thank you. Okay. First item, now that Leanne's been elected chair, is for approval of the November 30th, 2020 Marker Committee minutes. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in, that was Lana. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right. Wonderful. Okay. Okay, so the Historic Marker Program was first approved in the city of Winston-Salem in 2001. The first markers were installed in 2002. Forsyth County installed its first marker in 2013, and we just this past weekend installed our 65th marker. We have 8 markers currently in the county, 55 in the city of Winston-Salem, and 2 located in Clemens. This map shows the locations of all of our existing markers. Those are the ones in the yellow circles. And then the markers that we have applications for this evening are the ones in the purple stars. And interestingly, this is, I think, the first year I've been here that we have not had any applications that are in the downtown inset. Everybody is kind of outside of the right downtown area, which is really great to see, spreading the wealth a little bit beyond downtown. So the commission has funding for 2 markers in the city of Winston-Salem and 1 marker in an unincorporated part of Forsyth County to fund each year. We can award, or the committee can award, up to 2 self-funded markers. So tonight, the committee is going to listen to your presentations and they will be scoring your applications, and then they will make recommendations at the December 1st Historic Resources Commission meeting for the government funded marker applications. The staff then will draft marker inscriptions based on those applications. Then the commission will review and edit and approve those marker inscriptions. Staff will order the markers and then work with city teams to determine the exact marker placement based on what you all have requested in your applications. The applications will be scored by the committee tonight based on 12 criteria separated into 3 priority groups. The first priority is our the highest point totals awarded in that category, 5 points maximum for each criterion. So a lesser known site, event, organization, or person, a site that's connected to an aspect of underrepresented history, a building of historical or cultural significance that has been demolished, and a historic or a site where a historical or cultural event occurred. Our middle priority category, each can be awarded 3 points per criterion. So an endangered or threatened site, an existing building rather than a demolished building of historical or cultural significance, a historic landscape, or a person or organization of historical or cultural significance. And then our lowest priority category, where only 1 point can be awarded per criterion, is awarded to markers that are in a location where there are not many other markers, that the marker helps identify or create a sense of place in an area, and the marker identifies a property or area prioritized for preservation or that has already been preserved. Our final criterion in that category is for an application that's scored in the top 5 for 2 consecutive years, but we don't have any markers tonight in that category, so that's a point that will not be awarded. So I'm going to introduce each application. Basically, I will show a representative photo that I think illustrates the application or topic, and then a snapshot of the map that shows the general proposed location of the marker. The applicant will then make a 5-minute or less presentation, and then the committee members may ask any questions they have of the applicant, which is sort of how we'll proceed through tonight. So as I mentioned, members of the committee are going to score each application tonight based on the criteria that we went over. They will send me their scores tonight and I'll tabulate them tomorrow morning. And then I will send emails to all of the applicants to say, you know, these are the scores, these are the 2 highest scoring applications in the city. And then if there are any high scoring applications that also are interested in self-funding, I'll include that information. Again, though, the Historic Resources Commission will make the final decisions on the markers at its commission meeting on December 1st. All right, so tonight we have 9 applications for city markers, although I believe we are still missing representatives from 2, but the first is for Dr. Charlie Brady Hauser, activist, educator, and legislator. Faye Hooser Price is the applicant, and she is with us tonight. There's a photograph of Dr. Hooser at work, and then it's marker location 1, or the star number 1, which is on K Court Avenue, the home place. So Faye, if you want to just let me know next slide when you are ready for me to proceed, I will flip it to the next slide. I am going to mute myself and turn off my camera.
Okay, well, thank you for allowing me to make this presentation. Didn't know that I would be up first, but here I am. My dad said that working to encourage the undesirable and promote the desirable was his goal. You can change slides, please. Charlie Brady Hauser grew up on a farm as a farm boy in Yadkinville, North Carolina. He was the 3rd of 13 children born to the late Reverend Daniel Montgomery and Callie Victoria Hauser of Yadkinville. It is now understood that both his parents and therefore he were descendants of Theophilus Hooser, also pronounced Hauser, co-founder of the Yadkinville, North Carolina, and relative of Kate Bidding Reynolds' family. This marker would commemorate the achievements of an able and industrious man of color and the positive actions he took to secure inclusion for himself and his class in an American dream from which he was systematically disenfranchised. Change slide, please. Dr. Charlie Brady Hauser came to Winston-Salem in 1936 as a young student at Winston-Salem Teachers College. After graduation from college, he married his childhood sweetheart, Lois Brown, in Winston-Salem, and he taught at 14th Street School. Except for a few years in South Carolina, Hendersonville, North Carolina, and in the European War Theater, he remained an active member of the community until his death in 2007. Change, please. Charlie Hauser was a soldier in World War II as a member of the 582nd Ordnance Company. He and his unit earned citations for participating in the 5 great battles of Western Europe. His quest for equality led him to challenge the segregated army and seek an appointment as warrant officer. He passed the exam twice. However, when he showed up for the office to get his appointment, he was told that there would be no N-word officers in this man's army. Change slide. With a good conduct medal on his release and undeterred from pursuing the full American dream, Charlie Hauser tested the interstate Jim Crow laws in 1947 on his way from Winston-Salem to teach at West Virginia State College. Again, he formally challenged segregation 9 years before Rosa Parks and 13 years before the sit-ins started in Greensboro, North Carolina. He was included in the PBS documentary, You Don't Have to Ride Jim Crow. Change, please. He earned his doctorate of education at the University of Pennsylvania and then taught at Winston-Salem State University. Determined to make his whole community, both black and white, the best that he could be, he enthusiastically participated in social, political, arts, education, mental health, volunteer segments of the city's organizations. Change, please. Dr. Hauser was a professor at Winston-Salem State University from 1956 to 77, where he was chairman of the Department of Education and director of teacher education 68 to 76, living in the Boston area of Winston-Salem, as white flight finally afforded blacks the opportunity to acquire properties in those areas. Change slide. While at Winston-Salem State U, he was assistant secretary-treasurer of the CIAA, where he developed the conference's 1.6 rule prediction table in 1969 that helped schools more fairly evaluate students, athletes for college. Also, Dr. Hauser was a life member of the National Education Association. Change, please. He successfully ran and won 2 terms in the North Carolina State Legislature, serving Winston-Salem's citizenry during the 1983-84 and 1985-86 terms. He participated actively in all local elections, personally taking people to the polls to vote. He served as judge and registrant at a Paisley Precinct and Haynes Community Center Precinct, where he supervised elections. Change, please. Dr. Hauser had a heart for service for Winston-Salem community. To that end, he was on the Forsyth Nursing Home Community Advisory Committee, where he was named volunteer extraordinaire. He was on the Arts Council, was a trustee at the Forsyth Tech Community College, on the Dixie Classic Fair Committee, board chair of Northwestern Region ALANC and Patterson Avenue YMCA, board member of Mental Health Association of Forsyth County, active with the American Heart Association, the Community Corrections Resources, Inc., and the Inter-Municipal Corp Committee. Change slide, please. Dedicated to the prospect that he could add value in a leadership capacity, even to organizations that previously discriminated against him, Dr. Hauser was on the Tanglewood Beautification Council, an institution that until the late 1960s did not allow persons of African descent to participate in those activities. Change, please. Dr. Hauser was named Professor Emeritus at Winston-Salem State University, given a doctorate degree of Human Letters, named to the Board of Visitors, and inducted to the Winston-Salem Hall of Fame. He also had time for numerous hobbies that he loved: boating, camping, gardening, photography, and even beekeeping. Change, please. As a boater, he and his wife, Lois Hauser, became members of the United States Power Squadron and helped to chart North Carolina's intercoastal waterways, receiving a Merit Mark Award in 1977. Change, please. He found time to mentor many students, young and old. Change, please. Hosting 2 African and Korean students who attended Wake Forest University. Change, please. Dr. Hauser was a spiritual person who was a superintendent of Sunday school and a trustee at Mount Zion Baptist Church, an NAACP Life Membership Chair, and treasurer of the Hauser-Williams-Russell Family Reunion that celebrated 100 years of reunions in 2015. He also helped to organize the neighborhood K-Court Community Club, which was dedicated to maintaining the highest quality of living for its members. As a decorated war veteran, he died on Memorial Day at age 90. On Veterans Day, at age 90. He was married to educated Lois Brown Hauser for 65 years. They had 2 children, award-winning actor, writer, director Faye Hauser Price, and Queen Elizabeth's Lord Lieutenant of Bristol, England, Peaches Golding. Thank you for listening to this presentation.
Thank you, Faye. And excuse me for pronouncing it Hauser.
Oh, it's fine.
Instead of Hauser. I'm never quite sure locally which one to go with because you hear
Sometimes
both.
our family members weren't either.
All right, committee members, do any of you all have questions for Faye regarding the application?
Hi, Faye. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that and all of the things that you mentioned about Dr. Hauser, he was just a personable man that, greeted people on any level where you were. I just remember him being that type of approachable person and a very sweet and strong spirit at the same time. And I'm glad to see you bring this forward.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Dad was a force of nature, but as you said, because of those 13 brothers and sisters, all different, he learned to love all kinds of people.
Well, I would just have to say, you must be so proud to have had him as your father.
Absolutely.
He was a phenomenal man in so many ways and in giving so much to his community. So I commend you. I'm really astounded.
And I see nodding heads, and I also haven't gotten a preview of the the presentation for Alta Vista. His name is going to come up again in just a little bit. So thank you very much, Faye. I do not believe we have anybody on yet from Ephesus Junior Academy. Is that correct? Anybody? Or Centerville National Register Historic District? Centerville. Okay. I'm going to skip over those 2 presentations. And if we get anybody who comes in late, then we can come back and you all can hear those. Whoops. Sorry. Okay. All right. Miss Gloria Ford, you are up next to talk about your parents. Let me unmute you. I'm going to mute myself and
Are you ready? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. We're ready for you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
You ready? No, you're fine. All right. I'm going to mute myself now, though, so I don't interrupt you.
Okay. My name is Gloria Ford, and it's actually my father-in-law, who was a wonderful person to me. I couldn't ask for a better father-in-law, James Ford. He was known as brought forward to a lot of people in the community. He went to Winston-Salem Teachers College. He graduated in 1948. When he graduated from Winston-Salem State, he turned down a job for teaching and coaching and instead went in sales at Bitmore Dairy, which had a plant on Stratford Road. Eventually moved from sales to route operator. In 1955, he left Biltmore and started his own business as an independent distributor from his home on Rochester Street. He was the first Black man to have his own dairy business in North Carolina. His main goal was to serve the community, his Black community. He had door-to-door service. He would serve the people who did not have much funding. He never called them poor people. He called them his people. And he would serve them door-to-door service every day, and they would only have to pay him once a month. And no one went hungry, and no child went without. He made sure of that. He made sure that the Black community had the same things that the other communities had as well, in dairy products and meats as well. Mr. Ford also was on the committee. Y'all, please bear with me. I stutter and I'm nervous. Mr. Ford also was on a committee for the Y. He was the chairman of the board for the YMCA in 71. He also was on the committee for the Y when they transferred from Patterson Avenue and went to the Winston Lake Y. He was one of the founders of Delabrook Presbyterian Church. He also was inducted into the Sportsman Hall of Fame Club. He was an All-American athlete. He was also a World War II veteran and a Prince Hall Mason. Mr. Ford's family gave back to the Black community in more ways than one. His family was the first family to have their own beer and grill. They used to call it a beer garden on 14th Street, where people could come and drink beer and eat good food. And Black and white came there, which that wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And his brother had a store that was on 14th Street that people could come to the store and get anything they needed, and they only paid once a month for their stuff. His other brother was one of the first Black firemen that we have here, that y'all gave I think y'all gave a plaque to not too long ago. The Ford family really gave back to the community. They loved Winston-Salem. And I loved my in-laws because they loved people and they cared about people. My mother-in-law gave a little boy a TV out of her kitchen because he didn't have one. That was the kind of people that they were. And I just want to do something to recognize Mr. Ford. I appreciate the offer and the time.
Gloria, you did a fantastic job.
Thank you. I'm nervous.
Thank you. You did great.
Okay.
All right, committee members, do any of you all have questions for Ms. Ford about the application?
I don't have any questions. I just think it was a lovely application, and
thank you.
And I have to say, I even have an old mug that says Biltmore Dairy.
Yes,
I do.
Yeah.
And I know it. And pet milk is my favorite. So
mine's too. Thank you for that.
Well, he sounds amazing. We need more folks like him for sure.
yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Without question.
Amazing.
Yeah, Ms. Ford, I noticed that you think Cleveland Avenue was the site for the marker. Is that correct?
Yes, because he lived on Rochester. And I was like a designated spot there. I was thinking over there on Cleveland Avenue because he He lived right there on Rochester Street, which is right there near the back of Piedmont Circle.
Oh, okay, up on that end of Cleveland.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Anyone else? All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Gloria.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to move to our next application, which is for St. Phillips Moravian Church, origin 1822. And we have Barbara Morris and Martha Hartley on the call, ready to talk to us about that.
My name is Barbara Chisholm Morris, and I'm a member of St. Phillips Moravian Church of 51 years. And St. Phillips is the only Black Moravian church in the United States. And Martha will give you the history of St. Phillips.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. St. Phillips Moravian Church on South Church Street is the oldest standing African-American church in North Carolina. Freedom was announced there in 1865. The church, the adjacent God's Acre, and the nearby second graveyard are remarkable touchstones of the Black experience in Winston-Salem. St. Phillips is one of the oldest African-American congregations in the country and will celebrate their 200th anniversary next year. Change, please. St. Phillips is the only historic Black Moravian church in the United States. This contrasts sharply with the worldwide Moravian church with a majority people of color from Missionary Work, which began in 1732. St. Phillips' uniqueness is the story of the Moravian church in the American South, where their origin signified religious intent and a segregationist attitude towards people of African descent. Change, please. Like most religious groups in America, the Moravians did not object to slavery, but regarded one's place in life as ordained, with salvation the key. In time, a small number of enslaved people chose conversion, were considered spiritual equals, but remained enslaved. This integrated fellowship for Afro-Moravians included worship and burial practices, as well as educational opportunities. Change, please. Free and enslaved people of African descent contributed to the building and function of Wachovia. The central town of Salem was administered by a theocratic government where slave ownership was limited to the church, with the hope of keeping enslaved numbers low and the Moravian work ethic high. Change, please. By 1800, stylistic changes reflected evolving attitudes, including those that fueled segregation, and Black worshipers were not always welcome. Change, please. Phoebe's infant was the last person of African descent buried in God's Acre. In 1816, Moravian burials were segregated with the establishment of the Negro God's Acre. Regulations remained in place about owning enslaved people in town, but some residents continually pushed against the rules. Change, please. In this pedestrian-oriented community, town was basically the few blocks around Salem Square. Out of town, the slave rules did not apply, like across Salem Creek, where Dr. Schumann held enslaved people. His farm is in the foreground of this painting that looks back towards what is town. Change, please. When storekeeper Conrad Kreuzer retired in 1816, he leased 30 acres on the ridge west of town for a farm outside of town. Kreuzer enslaved Sam and Betsy, who lived there. In 1818, Kreuzer's new brick farmhouse was built facing east towards the Shalaford Road, now South Broad Street, where Carolina University is located. Change, please. In February 1822, the Salem Female Missionary Society formally petitioned church leaders to begin outreach to enslaved people in and around Salem. A minister was chosen, and the first two meetings were held at the Negro Quarter. The third service on May 5th, 1822, was held in Conrad Kreuzer's barn, where the founding of the congregation was observed and where the historic marker is proposed. Change, please. Services continued at Kreuzer's barn and other outlying places until the consecration of the new church adjacent to the Negro God's Acre in 1823, shown at the right. Here, the painter's view is from the vicinity of Kreuzer's farm looking eastwardly toward Salem. Change, please. The Kreuzer farm passed to the Leverings and then to the Breitz family in 1836. Change, please. Change, please. The bird's eye view shows the intact block along South Broad Street with house and outbuildings, one of which is likely the barn where St. Phillips was founded. The property remained in the Breitz family until the mid-20th century when it was purchased by Piedmont Baptist College, now Carolina University. Change, please. For years, Kreuzer's house was used by Piedmont Baptist College as a dormitory until it was torn down in 1965. Much of the block remains undeveloped lawn today, and undisturbed areas are potentially rich in archaeological resources. The barn location is presently unknown. Change, please. African-born and derived people are among the founders and builders of Winston-Salem. St. Philip's Moravian Church is a deep and enduring part of the city's history, and a historic marker commemorating their origin 200 years ago will identify a place in the urban landscape not hitherto known to have such significance. Mrs. Morrison, I thank you.
Thank you both. All right, committee members, any questions or comments?
St. Phillips continues to amaze me. I did not know, frankly, and I should have probably, Martha, about this early location of the St. Phillips congregation. And it's been documented in such a really outstanding fashion that I commend you for presenting this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to say also that, I have a lot of knowledge of St. Philip's. I live 2 blocks from the church. Had no idea it did not start there on Church Street.
Me either.
Of course, you all know St. Philip's is near and dear to my heart. And of course, working with Martha Hartley, I knew that it started over here. Martha, this is my question. And hello, Papa. The marker that you're proposing, is it to state that this was St. Philip's, or would it be broader to state that people from around the community worshiped at this particular church? And, I'm just trying to sort of broaden the scope.
Well, what it represents the places that were used for services before the log church was built. So it was outside places. The services were held in the Negro Quarter, which was the Wachovia Administration Farm. They were held at Kreuzer's. And then after May 5th, there were other services held at the paper mill and also at Dr. Schumann's barn. So what this does is it helps us understand that during this period of time when these slave regulations were in place, it was these outside locations where enslaved people were living, like Sam and Betsy, who were on this farm, and of course, the people on Schumann's farm and the enslaved people at the paper mill. And so the barns were used often as gathering places because they were usually large buildings. So Kreuzer's farm being outside of Salem, he already had enslaved people there, so it was chosen as a place to gather the enslaved people around Salem. And sometimes there were as many as 100 people or more at these services. So it represents this emergence of this congregation, and it shows us that it's in a place that people just didn't know about. And that's something for us to think about as a community. The history of people of African descent is bigger than what we think it is in this early period. Right. So I don't know if that answers your question, Cheryl.
Yeah, I think that it does. I did not remember seeing the marker text in the application, and it may have been there. But I think what was important for me was what you said, for people to realize, I guess, the that the people that attended there, when we think St. Philip's Moravian Church, we sort of just think of a smaller entity, but it served enslaved people throughout this area. And I just wanted to sort of ensure that the scope of the broadness of the people who worship there was.
Well, you're right. You're exactly right. When they began this outreach, it was actually for the entirety of Wachovia. The church in Salem was meant to be the place where people of African descent attended. So that's what they said in the diaries, and so that's what they were doing. So there were people from all over that came. That's right. Exactly right, Cheryl. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Other questions?
Great research. As always, Martha.
Well, you know, Leanne, it was during, you have so much that goes across your desk, but it was back when Mo and I did the Town of Salem survey in 1988 and 99 when we discovered that, in fact, this is where all this happened. This was actually a farm because it was torn down in 65, the house, a beautiful 5-bay Flemish Mine house.
Yeah.
It disappeared from the landscape and from our memory. So, but it was during a CLG project when this was discovered.
My memory is feeble these days.
That was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
We'll look at it.
All right. Thank you very much, Barbara and Martha. I really enjoyed that presentation. Our next applicant is St. Benedict the Moor Catholic Church, or the History Committee of the church. We have Gerald McCoy on the call tonight, who will be presenting the marker application. It is proposed to be located at star number 6 on 12th Street. And there we go. All right, take it away.
My name is Gerald McCoy. I'm a parishioner at St. Benedict the Moor Catholic Church. Today, I'm here to tell you a bit about our church and why we think a historical marker would be appropriate for our site. Next slide, please. Hello? St. Benedict the Moor.
It advanced. Yes, yeah. It advanced for me. Yeah. Can you all see the new slide?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
St. Benedict the Moor is a historically African-American parish located in East Winston at 1625 East 12th Street. It has been a part of Winston-Salem's African-American community since 1940. Of the 92 parishes and missions in the Catholic Diocese of Charlotte, in which we are located, only 4 are historically Black, and one of those 4 is St. Benedict the Moor. It is now a multi-ethnic, multicultural parish charged with serving the spiritual needs of the Winston-Salem community. Next slide, please. It was founded during the era of segregation to provide Black Catholics in Winston-Salem a place where they could worship with the dignity and freedom not afforded to them by the churches of that era. On Sunday morning, November 24th, 1940, St. Benedict the Moor became a parish, celebrating its first Mass in the chapel of Howard Robertson Funeral Home in Winston-Salem on Patterson Avenue. The parish was allowed to worship there until the completion of the parish church building in 1941, where we are still worshiping. The church was named in honor of St. Benedict the Moor, a Black Franciscan friar and the patron saint of African Americans. Next slide, please. Next, I'd like to discuss some of the contributions to the community by our parish, starting in the area of education. Next. The Sisters of St. Francis from Allegheny, New York were invited by the parish to assist our educational needs. In 1946, St. Anne's Academy was opened, a boarding school serving young ladies of color, both locally and from several southeastern states. Next slide, please. In September 1950, St. Benedict Grammar School was opened to serve the educational needs of the African American communities. Next slide, please. Among its many graduates, here are a few that might be familiar to the local community. Mr. Togo West, who served as Secretary of Veterans Affairs during the Clinton administration. Ms. Evelyn Terry, member of the North Carolina House of Representatives and former member of the Winston-Salem City Council. Mr. Gregory Turner, former Assistant City Manager for the City of Winston-Salem. And Mr. Cedric Russell, Owner Director of Russell Funeral Home, a prominent Winston-Salem African American business, and who is also the son of former Winston-Salem Alderman and Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Carl Russell. Next slide, please. Now on to the missionary work of our church. Next, please. In 1969, St. Benedict the Moor assumed responsibility for its first mission. Our Lady of Fatima Chapel, supported by the parish, was opened in downtown Winston-Salem on Cherry Street. That mission has since become a mission of Our Lady of Mercy Church. Next slide, please. In 1970, Catholics in Kernersville became the second mission of St. Benedict the Moor, supported until 1973, when that mission was raised to the status of a parish and became Holy Cross Catholic Church in Kernersville. Next, please. In 1987, Good Shepherd Church in King was established as a mission church of St. Benedict the Moor, and it remains a current mission today. Next slide, please. In 1990, the parish began what we refer to as our migrant ministry, providing food and clothing to the migrant workers in Yadkin County. In 1999, the first Spanish Mass was celebrated for the Latino community in our church. As a result of this outreach, the parish has a substantial Hispanic membership. Next slide, please. Our church has always been committed to serving the community. Next slide, please. Its many activities have included the Resurrection Summer Day Camp, which partnered with St. Stephen's Episcopal Church and Delaware Presbyterian Church to offer a 4 to 5 week program of summer activities for the children in the community. Next slide, please. In 2004, the Community Knowledge Center was established at the church, sponsored by Winston-Salem State University, offering classes for senior citizens, tutoring for middle school students, and income tax services for the Hispanic community. Next slide, please. Also working with WinstonNet, a local organization dedicated to closing the digital divide, the church has sponsored a community lab for use by anyone needing access to the internet. Next slide. The church has also been a food distribution center working with the Second Harvest Food Bank of Northwest North Carolina. Next slide, please. In closing, I would like to say that another reason we are especially interested in having a marker at our site has to do with the changing demographics of our parish. If the current trends continue, our parish will eventually cease to be an African-American parish, and we would like it to be remembered that our parish was originally established as an African-American parish created to serve the African-American community of our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerald. Committee?
I think that the fact that you want that marker to be established to commemorate the church's origin, I think is commendable. I did see your, I think your text of what you wanted on the marker, and it could be expanded. And I say that because we set up a sort of a pop-up museum, and we listed all of the historically Black schools in Winston-Salem. And of course, Cedric Russell was at one of the openings. And of course, right. You know, his thing is, where is St. Anne's? And you know, he mentioned these schools that I had heard of, but didn't have the reference to like that. So I think it's important to include that kind of information. I mean, you have a really rich history, and to expound upon some of the things, some of that service to the African-American community would be great.
I agree completely, but we were trying to stay within the word limit of the marker.
Yeah, so, you know, those of you who are applicants and on the committee, based on the size of the characters that we put on the markers, usually we use inch, but sometimes we get 1.5 inches. We're limited in the number of characters, of course, because it's a physical object. So I believe when we have 1 inch high text, we can use 670 characters. And when we use 1.5 inches, it's 300 and something. You know, so we try to pack a lot of information into a very short amount of.
Yes, I know that. I've been on the other end. I've been on the other end of that, so I trustfully understand.
But yes, I mean, of course, we want to get as much detail as we can into the markers.
Well, I think this congregation is unique in that it served historically African American Catholic people. And I was working in preservation 100 years ago, back when Bishop Kyle's house was demolished on 14th Street.
Right.
And, you know, I have to say it broke my heart that, because it was a wonderful building. And I'm sure you would agree, Mr. McCoy. It was a lovely building, and it just makes me sad, because that's a further loss of our historic African-American fabric. But the fact that the church remains, I think, is significant. And you know, personally, I worked for years with a woman who is still one of my good friends, who was a devout member there, Tony Tuppence. I don't know if you remember Tony.
I've met her. I think she's in Charlotte now, but I've met her
in Charlotte now.
I've met her on several occasions.
Yes, lovely woman.
A dear friend of a dear friend of mine at the church.
Yes, yes. So, you know, it is, it's a wonderful application, and I thank you all for submitting it.
You're very welcome.
Anybody else from the committee? Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just was really interested to hear the presentation and read the application materials. I've heard about St. Anne's in some oral history interviews I've done, but I hadn't really known a lot of the history. So I was pleased to be able to learn more about that. And I think it's a great story to be able to tell more people in the community.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerald. All right, our next application is for the Alta Vista neighborhood, which is being brought forward by the Boston Preservation Group and Renolda House. And we have got a bunch of people on the call who are in support of that. I'm not sure who's going to be presenting, but I will trust you to unmute yourselves and take it away and let me know when you're ready to change slides.
Right. Well, my name is J.P. Beatty. And first, I want to just thank everybody for this opportunity on behalf of my co-presenters, Brenda Miller-Galloway and Phil Archer. And I also have to say that it is so great to see my hometown friends. And I'm seeing Faye Hauser, who's in my class in elementary school, whom I haven't seen maybe since elementary school. I just want to say hello, and it's great to see everyone. We are pleased to present this application for this presentation to a great neighborhood that we grew up in. You may change slides, please. So Alta Vista, Boston, where is it? Alta Vista / Boston, which we are more popularly known and calls it today, is located in the northwest part of the city. It is bound to the north by 27th Street, to the south by 24th and a half, and to the west by Kirkwood, and to the east by Cherry Street and a short distance beyond. Now, these were the early boundaries. Today, it has spread a little bit more and covers a broader community. Okay, you may change slides, please. Who lives there? In addition to Brenda Miller-Galloway and myself and other folks and friends and neighbors that are still there from my childhood days, the Boston community is a mixed income community that was very, very great to grow up in, because you had domestic workers, you had professional people like Faye's father, you had doctors, you had dentists, you had ministers, you had business owners. But the great thing about this community was that the kids played together. And my mother, who was a maid and a factory worker with 7 kids, her kids, all of my brothers and sisters were able to mingle and meet and associate with other folks that were professionals and play with their kids, which inspired us to do more with our lives. So this was a great, great neighborhood to grow up in. And even in my career down in Atlanta today, where I now live, folks ask me, how did I learn to do video production and things that I do living in the South? And I tell them it was my neighborhood and the city that raised me. Thank you very much. Okay, next slide, please.
The community of Boston has a long enduring history that to this day is still held closely to the hearts of those who lived, loved, and helped develop their neighborhood into one of the best Black communities in the nation. Originally developed in 1927 for Black professionals and named Alta Vista because its location was the highest elevation in Winston-Salem, two significant changes soon occurred that would become part of the legacy that defined this Black community. One, the community became a mixed-income neighborhood that consisted of skilled laborers, business owners, domestic workers, educators, physicians, factory workers, pastors, lawyers, and more. Two, the name was changed from Alta Vista to today's more popularly known name of Boston. Boston. A community of caring neighbors, a community where kids could play outside without fear of crime or thoughts of racial disparity. A community where students could enjoy walking to school and being educated by nurturing teachers. A community where children of domestic workers played with and visited the homes of children of professionals and were inspired to seek higher goals in life. A community with many residents who helped Winston-Salem continue its growth. Residents like Federal District Judge Richard Irwin, State Legislator C.B. Hauser, John Adams, founder and president of Safe Bus Company, educators Ella Bohannon, N.B. Cook, Mabel Wooten, principals Ruth Lewis, Billy D. Friend, and John Beatty, physicians Albert Coleman, R.L. Smith, and dentist Raymond Oliver, pastors A.H. McDaniels, Jerry Drayton, and others. City staff members Patricia D. Norris, Winston-Salem's first Black female police chief, Jack Bond, the first Black assistant city manager, and of course, Al Beatty, who dedicated his life to the betterment of Winston-Salem by serving as a personal specialist for the Experiment in Self-Reliance, director of the city's manpower training program, personnel director for the city, and as assistant city manager until he retired in 1994. Alta Vista, a name that truly describes the Boston community, not because of the high geographical elevation, but because of the high elevation of love, caring, and respect that its residents have for each other and their community.
So on behalf of the early pioneers and current residents of the Alta Vista Boston community, we would like to thank the Reynolds Historical Society and the City of Winston-Salem for your consideration in honoring our ancestors and neighbors that made us all proud to call the Boston community our home. And this is with on behalf of Brenda Miller Galloway, Artisa Bohannon, and of course myself, J.P. Beatty. And now I'd like to introduce my neighborhood sister, Brenda Galloway.
The community.
Hi, my name is Brenda Miller Galloway, and I am here in support of creating an Alta Vista Boston historical marker. The marker will serve as recognition for the great history of those who lived in and continue to live in the area. Many of those who lived in the Alta Vista Boston area played significant roles in the history of Winston-Salem. Two of those people are my parents, Harvey and Rosalie Miller. Knowing the history from which you came from is important. The house that I now live, I lived in as a child, and the house was built in 1936 and purchased by my father. My father served as major domo for Reynolds family. There's a picture of him in the dining room of the Reynolds House Museum, honoring him for his contributions. His story is just one of many who lived in the Alta Vista Boston community. Change slides, please. Alta Vista, I'm sorry, excuse me. His story is just one of who lived in the Alta Vista community that deserved to be remembered from generation to generation in history. Thank you for your time and consideration of this historical marker, Alta Vista Boston. And as you look and see the child on the left, that is me, the smallest one on the left, Brenda. Thank you. I'm sorry for my voice. I have allergies. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you so much. We can have the next slide now, please. So this is what we're proposing for the text on the marker. Alta Vista Boston neighborhood. The Alta Vista neighborhood more popularly known as Boston, was developed in 1927 as a suburb for Black professionals, considered the first of its kind in the South, but evolved into a mixed income neighborhood. It was built at the highest elevation in the city. Residents included leaders in business, education, religion, medicine, and city administration, as well as a chief of police, state assemblyman, federal judge, founding member of the Fire Royals, domestic workers, and laborers. This marker commemorates those who work tirelessly in this community, not only to build for themselves, but for generations to come. And now I would like to introduce Mr. Phil Archer. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty. Looking at the priorities, this marker would answer the criterion within priority 1 to connect to underrepresented history and historical narrative of Black suburbanization. Alta Vista really was at the edge of the city and just at the edge of the countryside. Also civic uplift and community resilience over nearly a century. Next slide, please. Within the second priority, the qualifying aspect or criterion is that the neighborhood embodies the stories of persons and organizations of historical and cultural significance. And seen here is the bus company, which was the largest Black-owned and operated transportation company in the nation for a time. And Adelaide Fries, the historian, has written that Alta Vista was the very first purpose-built professional neighborhood for Blacks in the entire South. Next slide, please. Within the third priority, really, this marker answers all 3 criteria because it is in an underrepresented area. According to the North Central Area Plan Update 2015, there are only 3 historical markers in the whole North Central area: the Pond, New Bethel Baptist Church, and the Oddfellows Cemetery. Next slide, please. It also presents an opportunity for an impact on the present community. The marker will serve as a reminder of the high quality of life that Black residents enjoyed in their own neighborhood during the years of segregation. It will help dispel myths about disrepair, crime, and low-income education levels within Black neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Lastly, there would be an impact on preservation. That the same update identifies the need to encourage property owners to research and recognize the history and significance of their properties in the areas in which they live. This marker would serve as a reminder to current and future residents to honor the memories and traditions of early residents by maintaining their homes, respecting their neighbors, and keeping the neighborhood safe and clean. Next slide, please. On behalf of Brenda Miller-Galloway, Artisa Bohannon, JP Beatty, and other neighbors, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Committee members, do you have any questions or comments?
I just want to ask Mr. Beatty if he is related to Mr. Al Beatty.
Yep, that's my big brother.
Yeah.
That's my big brother, and also John Beatty, who was a principal there. He's retired also.
Yeah,
we grew up all over there in a 2-bedroom house on 25th Street, right behind Brenda Miller. And Brenda and I have been sisters and brothers neighborhood since we were, 3? Well, I was born over in that neighborhood. So
that's great. Yeah, I've worked with your brother Al for many years within the city of Winston-Salem, and I thought he was something.
He loves this city. We all do.
So,
thank you.
I do have a question for any of you. We also have a marker application for Boston Cottages, and I'm trying in my mind to differentiate sort of the difference between these 2 neighborhoods. Obviously, we have a specific plat for Alta Vista. And I just don't know, I'm trying to figure out the distinction and when sort of the integration into Alta Vista that Boston Cottages made.
Okay, maybe I can help you out a little bit. Boston Cottages obviously was way before Alta Vista came along.
Right.
The Alta Vista, quote, Boston neighborhood, as everybody knows it now, and I've known it throughout my life, this whole presentation for that community, what I see and feel in my heart, and everyone, all of my classmates and friends I spoke with over the last few weeks about this, and neighbors, it is about uplifting a community. You know, today, a lot of times folks will get careers and get great professions. They move out of their neighborhoods. They move to the suburbs. Yep. And they leave the neighborhood to just the folks that are barely hanging on and so forth and so on. Boston was not like that. And again, as I said, we had folks right next door to our 2-story house with my mother and 7 children in it was John Adams' house. When I remember when he built the house, it was like, oh my goodness, look at this big house. It was like a huge house. On the other side of us was the Morgans, who was also part of the Safe Bus Company founders. And then, of course, later on, Jack Bond moved into the Morgans' house, and he was the first assistant Black city manager. And throughout the neighborhood, you know, Mr. Irvin, who's an attorney, he and his son and I played together, Rick Irvin, and it was all through the neighborhood. It was about the people in the neighborhood. It put a positive image into everybody. That's why Al probably helped become an assistant city manager, because he was influenced by other people in our neighborhoods to strive for higher goals. And while our parents, yes, they worked domestic work because they had to survive. They had to do what they had to do to feed their children, and they did it with pride, they did it with dignity, but they told us, go get an education. All of my teachers growing up from Kimberly Park through Paisley High School during the times of segregation, all of our teachers were Black. But it was a positive influence on us because they cared. They made sure we studied. And as a result of that, so many people from that neighborhood have lived on and done other things to help improve the city of Winston-Salem and wherever else they set their roots. So there's a difference. We're talking about something that's going to be uplifting to future generations, to folks that are now moving into that community. We want them to see this plaque as an inspiration to keep that community clean, to say, oh my goodness, look what these people did way back when or whenever. It seemed way back when, but we got to keep this neighborhood. We're going to inspire each other. This is an inspiration marker more so of a historic marker. And whereas Boston Cottages talks about that era, this neighborhood, we want to push people forward to continue achieving great things in life.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the committee have questions?
Just to sort of chime in on what Mr. Beatty said, you know, I grew up in the area as well, and we all know it as Boston, and it wasn't until I was researching for my book that I found out it was called Alta Vista. So I agree with the committee that put forth that name. You know, Boston will have more recognition and sort of, can I say, carry on more longevity.
Yeah.
And identity for the people in the community.
And let me just add one quick thing. The location where we're proposing for the marker to be at 24th and a half and 25th Street, that's at the intersection right there at Mr. Adams' house, who's the president of Safe Bus Company. And that was known as the bus stop. And the bus that came across there, where you got on the bus to go downtown, the bus was Boston 25th Street. It's what was across the top of the bus. Everybody you talk to in Winston, whether they lived at Happy Hill Gardens, Columbia Heights, if you talk to anybody, that area is known as Boston. We definitely need to recognize it as Boston. And we can say originally known as Alta Vista, but later better known as Boston.
Yeah.
Boston is what folks know that community by.
Did Saki Hamlin live in that neighborhood?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
I thought so.
Ms. Bohannon. Ms. Bohannon, you've been on this call a long time and quiet. Did you want to add anything?
Just that this, I realized about 20 years ago when I was looking at the building plans for the house that my parents built on 4.5 Street, I saw on that on the blueprints Alta Vista, and it just always stuck in my mind, and I had no idea what it meant until all of this started happening, and we started doing more and more research, and we were finding out who the original owners of homes in our neighborhood were, and their relationships to magnets, their relationships to the Hayneses, the Reynolds, all the educators and professional people. And until I knew a little bit about the people on my street, but I didn't know just how widespread that the relationships were. And Brenda and JP, they're older than me, but I knew them. And we all had good relationships family-wise. We were a village. And when we were growing up, every husband and wife on that street, whether they had kids or not, they were our moms and dads, and they had as much rule over us as our own parents. Yep. And that's the kind of community that this place was and continues to be.
Thank you.
And I want to add that, if I may add one quick thing to Artisa. Artisa's mother was my 5th grade teacher. So that relationship goes way back also, like Kimberly Park.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. All right, our next application tonight is for the Waughtown Freedmen School. Spencer McCall is the applicant, and I know, there you are. All right, Mr.
Hello,
McCall, you ready?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you ready?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear
Great.
you.
Thank you all so much. So, of course, I'm from Waughtown. My mother's from Waughtown, actually. And we're going to discuss the Waughtown Freedmen School. Next, please. Well, there's a neat quote about, of course, how we have to go beyond ourselves to find our history by my mentor. Mentor, he doesn't know it, but of course, Mr. Richard Franklin. Next slide, please. Freedmen schools, beyond just being a place of learning, I wasn't even aware of this. There were, of course, Black code laws of the state that if a person of color was not working somewhere after slavery, they could be forced back into involuntary servitude. And this even included kids. So beyond just having their kids have to go to learn, there was also a push for these schools because if their kids were on the street loitering or in the fields loitering, they could be forced back into involuntary servitude. So there's a major push behind these schools beyond just learning. Next, please. The Freedmen, of course, in Waughtown and Salem and all over, beyond freedom, began to organize churches and schools. Next, please. Here's a timeline of course, the Freedmen schools in Forsyth County that we know about. There were 4 or 5. There was one in Waughtown that began in 1866, the one in Salem Happy Hill, 1867, the one in Louisville, and the one in Clemensville. So we know of 4 schools in Forsyth County. There are also schools in Davidson County and in Gifford County around us. Next, please. A neat fact to find out, what we're going to find out, was that even though our first teacher at the school was a white individual from Kernersville, that there were also later at this school Black teachers. And this is, of course, referenced in a book, actually an essay by a thesis paper that you can find below. It's on the slide sheet. Hostility and Hope, it's called, where she discusses the Black teachers that served in our Freedmen schools, which is phenomenal. I mean, it's hard to even imagine that. Next, please. So I had heard from being in Waughtown and Bellevue my entire life, always there, that there was a Freedmen school there. And so I began to research to find out if it really was true. And I did find records, of course, that it was true. And there was a Freedmen school there in both the Freedmen's Bureau records, in news articles, etc. Of also in oral history. But I did find concrete history, again, in news articles and also in the Freedmen's Bureau records. This is a neat article from Raleigh, which referenced the school in Waughtown. And the writer says, the Freedmen of this village, meaning Waughtown, deserve praise for their efforts in raising and supporting a school. It is, as I believe, the first and only Freedmen school in Forsyth. They organized a school for themselves and is taught by W.G. Kilkerner. This article was published in January of 1867. And of course, William Kerner is the grandson of the founder of Kernersville, Joseph Kerner. He also supported Blacks having the right to vote, etc. Next slide, please. We do know that they did apply to societies for help to fund their school that was not provided. So these folks in Waughtown paid for this school themselves, which is, again, hard to imagine at that time. They were just a year beyond freedom, and they had a priority on their kids being safe and also having a future, that they found the means to build that. Most of the people that were in Walltown at this time had ties to Salem. Many were Frees, or the names that you mentioned by Mrs. Hartley earlier. Those folks were all in Walltown at that time also, having worked in Salem or moved from Salem, etc. So this, of course, is a record from the Freedmen's Bureau that shows a report that was made in December of 1866. And it discusses the schools, the Freedmen schools in the state at that time. A school in Oxford, a school, with a P, I don't know what that says, Raleigh, Salisbury, one plantation called Smith Plantation, Snow Hill, Thomasville, Warrington, Walltown, and Wellington. A neat thing was the one in Walltown, as did many schools, had both a traditional school, day school, and also a night school. And we see that there are more kids enrolled in the night school than the day school. Having done research on these schools, early schools, it is obvious that sometimes there are also adults who were in these schools. And of course, the adults were working, so they would go to school at night, or older kids who couldn't afford to, whose parents had had them working during the daytime. So these schools oftentimes had schools on Sundays and also at night, which was a great benefit to the community. Next, please. The report in January of the next year, of course, does list a school in Salem. They began it, which is in Walltown. And it goes into detail about how many people were there, et cetera. Neat report in January of the next year. Next slide, please. There was a neat, of course, we know about the school in Salem and Happy Hill. There's a picture there, and of course, a meeting, some of their minutes from a meeting they had in November November 6th. And what was amazing was, of course, they first met in Salem in August of that year, but on the same day in November, they gave a report. There was also a meeting at the school in Louisville. Next slide, please. Of course, there's a meeting on November 6th, the same day as the second meeting for the one in Salem, with the folks in Louisville who met at the house, of course, of the Louisville founder's house. It's kind of amazing to realize they actually met at his house to discuss their school in Louisville. Next slide, please. The school in Walltown, we also know from other sources and many sources, was used beyond just the school as a school, but also for churches and even meetings, such as in convention. So it's amazing to realize, of course, this was a real community center in the area. And so because they owned it themselves, they were allowed to host or kind of, decide who could be there. And so people that couldn't meet for conventions and other places at that time could meet here. And there are numerous occasions of Freedmen and Walltown meeting there. Next slide, please. So where was this school exactly located? We do know that there was a center in Walltown of Black history and things happening around Walltown Street and 109 Thomasville Road. And so it wasn't surprising to find out that we looked at deeds of folks who lived in that area, who mostly were Frees families, that the school was located there. So in pulling a record from 1877 of an estate file of a former Frees, Harris Frees, his wife Paulina was still living and she kind of executed the estate. It does reference the school, the old church and school. And of course, we know where she lived, how we got where she lived. A neat fact about Harris and Paulina Frees is the Methodist, according to Adelaide Frees, his book about the county history, Lee Frees, who was one of her servants, mentioned how he was born, of course, in Walltown. And after freedom, the Methodist Blacks began to meet in the cabin of Harris and Paulina Frees. And of course, their neighbors were John and Mary Leinbach Frees, and that's where the people who began people who were Baptist. And he does discuss how they would go from one to the other and how they also would use a schoolhouse for their services after a while. Have a neat fact about that. Next slide, please. So this is where the area, of course, is, that area, if you know that area. If you know where Kermit's is, and if you know where the food line in Walltown is, that's where all this was going on at that time after freedom. Next slide, please. So again, just an 1870 snapshot, 1880, you'll see Harris and Paulina living there. You also will notice that John, if you didn't know, that John and Mary Leinbach Frees. So again, a very common, very well-known couple in history of Walltown and this county. John Frees, he died. His wife, Mary Leinbach Frees, married Charles Mars. And of course, his daughter was Eddie Mars. And so Mary raised Eddie Mars. In 1880, you will see another fun name here to our county history, living right in that same spot, the Reverend George W. Holland. And of course, we're from the history of First Baptist Church, that they started out with all the members, and their first members were all living in this little enclave. The Leinbachs, the Freeses, the Hineses / Wrights, the Yoakleys, all those folks who they named in their history of their church, living right in this little enclave. And so when Reverend Holland came from Danville, Virginia in the 1870s to start First Baptist, to organize these folks into a church, he was living right there in that same area. So there's a lot that went on in that little area. Next slide, please. Who would have gone there? And again, we were told that people that went there very prominent. We know who would have gone there would have been. Next slide, please. Isabella or Bale Butler White, whose father was pretty prominent in the area. He made wagons, was one of the few, if only Black wagon maker that we know of in the country at that time. He lived in Walltown. And she became a principal in Charlotte and she kind of brought the Black schools of Charlotte into the modern era. And a school was named in her honor. And she went to that school also. Next, please. Of course, we know Addie Morris. Everyone knows Addie, who was, of course, the founder of the Addie Morris School in Winston, the Colored Orphanage in Walltown, Bellevue, and also who was a missionary to Africa and abroad. And she sent many students to Chicago University at that time frame also. Next, please. And of course, the illustrious Dr. Schober, who was also another Walltown native and the first doctor in the state, who's a Black doctor. Next, please. Thank you very much for your time and consideration for this great honor. And thanks again.
Committee comments or questions?
Spencer, we need to get you back into Winston-Salem.
Yes, I every day I have to come back. I have to come back. I'm actually going to the airport right now, but I have to be back. There's just so much history there.
I mean, I commend you. I did not know a thing about this, and your always diligent research has provided me a real insight into this, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is what I love best about these meetings and finding out about all these great people and places and pieces of history of the city that I had no idea. So thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate all that research as well. That was really interesting. Thank you.
And same here, Spencer. Yeah, we got to get you back to Winston.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was just amazed again to realize that these folks had done this the first year beyond slavery, beyond freedom. That just says a lot.
Yes, it does.
And it speaks to the ages about the commitment of folks in our county and that area about education and the youth and also the youth.
Yes.
Spencer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, our last application for tonight, I believe, for a marker in the city will be from Pat Caldwell for the Boston Cottages neighborhood. This one is being brought forward by the Boston Thurman Community Engagement Roundtable. And Leanne, you had asked a question about the plats, and what I put together for this title slide, these are the plats for Boston Cottages that are recorded in the plat books at the Recorder of Deeds. So you can see these: Lincoln, Harrison is here, Cleveland, so these are the president streets. And then these are second, third, first, labeled on the plat, which of course, would be changed, but these are the plats. So Pat, if you are ready.
I'm going to run, take a break. I'll be back. I can hear you. I'll be right back.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. I put together the images that I've been sent over just into some slides. Do you want me to just kind of run through these, or?
Yeah, well, you can run through, because when I talk, like right now, I was going to kind of give a history of the cottages, the Boston Cottages, because right now, the focus is primarily on the Boston Cottages, because some of the cottages were moved. So I'll just kind of give, it says the Boston Cottages were developed by the Boston Cottage Company, an investment company that was formed by 15 white men in 1888. The Boston Cottage neighborhood represents a time when African Americans occupied the houses during the early 19th century. This presents a time in African American history that is significant because it represents one of the early neighborhoods established in Winston-Salem where Blacks where Blacks live together side by side, raising their families. It's the cottage was built primarily for renters. They were very cheaply built, and they were built for factory workers, sharecroppers, people that had moved in from some in North Carolina, some South Carolina. We presently had one of the cottages is right at the corner of 13th White, where they built Paisley, was destroyed, that we tried to save, but was unable to save it because they said it was termite infested. The cottage neighborhood represents families that were laborers, butlers, domestic workers, factory workers, and then he had family members that were employed by R.J. Reynolds that were from North and South Carolina. These were houses that were one story, that were very poorly built. And you can very kind of see how significant is that currently we still have the cottages in our area. We still have the shotgun houses in our area. Shotgun houses are located on Thurman, or located on 13th Street near the end of University, that was dissected when they built University Parkway, that kind of split the neighborhood in half. They are still in existence, and those were copies of the shotgun houses. And when we say shotgun houses are houses that were built straight through. There was the front, the middle, and the kitchen. And a lot of times in that area then, a lot of there were outhouses. There were no built-in bathrooms. So a lot of these still have the original form, and they've been colored. They have different colors, and some are unique because we have one that's located that has, now that's one of them that's on 13th Street. And then we have another cottage that is there that has the brick all around it. What is symbolized, but what we're trying to do is to inform people of the heritage in the neighborhood, that we still are very fortunate to have properties like this that have not been destroyed or demolished. There's different architectural designs. There's one that's located on 20th Street, it's 510 20th Street, that is still in its form, where and Mr. Beatty, James Beatty is on. So we went to school together. I went to school with his sister. This is where the Jeffries used to stay. It's a cottage that's located near Cherry Street. That is very unique. We have houses that are very unique in design. And what we're trying to do is to protect those and inform people of the significance of them and let them know that our history is not dead. Then the Paulson Cottages represent a small number of houses that still exist located on Thurman Streets. Many of the streets during this time were named after presidents. Roosevelt, Taft, Gillette, ran west from Thurman at the dead end. And during that time, a lot of these streets were not paved. They were mud. And if it rained, you were in trouble because you could not maneuver around very much because you just get caked up with. And this was red mud. And it says the shotgun houses that are on West 13th Street. And there's one protect the North Habitat built out are protected. They're clearly protected. That area is protected. So those houses you cannot do anything to them. They cannot be torn down. You cannot add anything to them. They are protected. So good that we have a lot of areas throughout the city with African American history that has been destroyed. But in this area, we still have houses that built in the 1920s, the 1900s, and the 1920s that are still located. There are houses located located on up on top of the hill that still have their tin roofs. Some have been they've put aluminum siding on them, but they still have the original form. So what we're trying to do is to protect the history and the legacy of these cottages so they will not be torn down. And the significance is that they talked of Alta Vista. Alta Vista is also was mentioned in my report where we were talking about doctors, lawyers, judges, ministers, domestic workers, funeral directors. We had everything in our community where we lived together as one. Not even though it was segregated during that time, we still remained and in the neighborhood where each one of us loved each other and families were very familiar with what's going on with the children. So that's the uniqueness of that. And Cherry Street divided us in 1960s. Although we were divided, we were still together. And a lot of the jobs and people began to get better homes once R.J. Reynolds began to provide better jobs. But Reynolds has always been one of the primary employers in the unit because they were sharecroppers that came in to build houses, and some of them have done that, and they still remain. What makes our area so significant is that we have lawyers, doctors, teachers, educators. I can name them. I can name the Gatson. Mr. Gatson was an electrician. His house is portrayed. Frank Merle, he was a brick mason. He had hired brick masons. They laid a lot of the concrete that was in the area. His house is portrayed. That's Mr. Gatson's house. There. And then we have Frank Morrell's house that's there. They tore down the greenhouse, and the Greens were part owner of the Safe Bus Company. So what we're trying to do is to let the public know that we're trying to protect African American houses that are very significant and have a lot of meaning to us, because Thurman Street was not always called Thurman. And a lot of people wonder why. It was formerly called Washington Street. It was Washington Street when it was not paved. We still have St. Holmes, and right down from the Boston Cottages, that is very significant in history because it is a Methodist church that has been since the 18th centuries that is still located. But we do have churches in our neighborhood. During that time, we had 42 educators that lived up in the area, and a lot of them, as they had talked about, lived in the Alta Vista area. But we had a TCL was on a call where Mr. Bohan, a business owner, this was her grandfather, he had a store on the corner of 12th and 12th Street and Cherry, because Cherry was one of the thoroughfares in this. So that's what we're trying to present, is the importance and the significance of the Boston Cottages remaining in our area, and to have a historical marking the fact that they were in the area. And they, like I said, they were cheaply built. They were for laborers. They were not like the two-car garages or the flat, but we all lived together as one. So that's my presentation. And we're currently working on a presentation with the journalism class at Wake Forest, but it is an ongoing project that is depicting the neighborhood. They've done interviews throughout the neighborhood, talking with people about the corner stores, the houses in the neighborhood, and the significance of the buildings and the properties that are still in existence in our neighborhood. So that's what we're trying to portray. Because, North Cherry Street is a historical district. It is in the registry. So we have out North Cherry Street, we have the Boston Cottages, and we have Alta Vista. So Alta Vista presented their information, and that's where a lot of the teachers, educators live, and a lot of the family houses are still there. They're one of the groups of houses that are still very well kept, very well manicured lawns, and still intact like they were back in the day.
Thank you.
And I thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate it.
Committee. Yeah, committee, do you all have questions or comments?
I just have a comment. Pat, I just so happen to have a meeting today with Ivan Weiss from Wake, who I think is working on the project you just referred to. So I was happy.
Ivan is coordinating the project, yes. And so tonight, he was not able to present everything because his students, it is ongoing.
Yes.
So we walked the neighborhood, the community. We've talked to residents. We've got pictures. So it's like ongoing. So I contacted him and he said, well, I won't be ready by the 17th because he still have students that are working on a lot of it. And we've assisted them with a lot of the history, a lot of the people that they needed to interview with or who they needed to talk to. So if one's interested in the presentation, I will check with Ivan to see when it is available.
Yeah, I think that was wonderful. I was really happy to hear what him and his students are working on. And then to bring it up again here in this meeting was just, it's kind of coincidental twice in one day, but I'm happy to hear about all that work that's going on to preserve the history.
Oh, right. Yes, because they've even interviewed people about the corner stores. I even told them when they talked about the stores, and I said that we have someone in our community that was like that, Al Beatty. I said, but I can remember when Al worked at the store. And they said, what? I said, yes. I said, but we have a lot of people that work the store. And he became city manager. And we grew up calling him Dank Beatty. And so we all went to school together. We had Miss Ivor Williamson that was the paper boy. His mother was a principal. Like Artisa's mother was a teacher. They were educators. We have Saki Flores that we're trying to cross North Path after. We need for people to submit names for this path. And, it intersects with the children's home where they're doing a walking trail that we're trying to find people that lived in the neighborhood. And we sent a mail out for them to name who they would like to name. So Sakis Flores was one of the Hamlins, was one that I had submitted.
Yeah. Well, I think Boston Cottages is one of the earliest African-American communities in Winston-Salem. And I remember when I first came to Winston and 100 years ago, but I remember all of the wonderful original fabric of late 19th, early 20th century structures, including shotguns and vernacular Victorian. And sadly, we have lost so many of those. And so I commend you for working on this to try and retain the heritage that is tremendously significant to our community. And I don't know if you know, again, another friend, Deronda Key Lucas.
She lives up at the end of near the children's home, where the boundary is the children's home where they're trying to put the trail.
Yeah.
So she lives in that. Yeah, I'm familiar with.
Deronda.
She was a neighbor, and I have a neighborhood association.
Well, that's great.
The Boston Thurman Neighborhood Association.
Still involved. And I think this, again, I think this is a tremendously worthy project, and I commend you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the committee have any questions about this one? All right. We don't have anybody from Ephesus Junior Academy on, do we? Or representing Centerville? All right, well, maybe they'll come back next year. Okay, so at this point, we have finished all the presentations for our proposed city markers, and we're getting ready to move to the county marker, which is a staff recommendation. So you all are certainly welcome to stay on if you're interested in hearing about staff recommendation for the county marker. But if you are ready to get off, I'll just remind you. So tonight, the committee members will score all of the applications. They will send the scores to me. We will tabulate or compile the scores tomorrow morning. And then the top two markers in the city, the two highest scoring markers in the city will be, sorry, one second. Okay, somebody let Spencer in. The top two highest scoring applications in the city will be awarded city-funded markers. And then I believe there are some of you who are interested potentially in self-funded markers. So then if we have applicants who are interested in self-funding that qualify for a marker, that we can award up to 2 self-funded markers. So potentially up to 4 markers in the city, somewhere between 2 and 4, will be recommended by the committee to the Historic Resources Commission for marker awards. The commission will make those awards at their December 1st commission meeting. Once the awards are made, then based on the information in your application, staff will craft the text. We will consult with the applicants about the marker text and the marker locations, and then the final text is approved by the commission. So are there any applicants that have questions about anything as far as the process going forward? Doesn't look like it. Okay.
No.
Thank you all for the presentations. I loved the intersectionality of so many of the marker applications and how I could see so many heads nodding as each of you were talking and listening to each other's presentations. It's a really joyful thing for all of us who are staff to the commission and everybody who is on the committee to do this every year and learn more about our local history. So many things I was not familiar with tonight. So thank you very much. All right, so our county. You're welcome. Our county funded marker recommendation is for Tanglewood Farm. So Tanglewood is an 1,100 acre property that was assembled in the mid 18th century in the western part of the Piedmont near the Yadkin River. In 2002, it was determined eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. It has historic significance as the former country estate of William Neal Reynolds, an important person. He was the brother of R.J. Reynolds, who became president of Reynolds Tobacco after his brother's death. It's also significant for its association with the early settlement of Southwest Forsyth County, its historic structures, and its historic landscape. It retains its historic arrangement of open fields, mature woodlands, and gardens associated with the manor house and its dependencies. So the red square that you see kind of overlaid on the aerial of Tanglewood represents the original 640 acre, 1 square mile area that was bought by William Johnson in 1747. He quickly then built a log fort or house for protection for his family, because this was during the French and Indian War. He died in 1765 and is buried in the Mount Pleasant Chapel Cemetery, which is marked with the green cross on the image. The land eventually passed to his grandson, or majority of the land passed to his grandson, James Johnson Jr., who some things say 1847, some things say 1859, but he built the brick manor house that you can see in the image as a wedding present for his daughter, Emily, upon her marriage to Zadok Griffith. Their son, Thomas, lived on the property until his wife died in 1920, and it was following her death in 1921 that Mr. Griffith sold the land to the Reynolds family. The manor house is located where the yellow star is on the map. So Reynolds added wings onto the manor house and renovated the interior. It looks like the image you see in the lower left today. Mrs. Reynolds created extensive gardens surrounding it and held many events on the grounds. Mr. Will, as he was known for raising standard bred horses, which raced in harnesses pulling buggies. So you can see a picture of him driving such a buggy in the upper left. And the equestrian complex with the paddocks, barns, the office, and the quarter-mile racetrack were all built during their ownership. When he died in 1951, he left Tanglewood and 20,000 shares of Reynolds stock under the management of a group of trustees to be developed into a park to benefit the residents of Forsyth County and Winston-Salem. But there was a provision in the will that it would revert to his heirs if the terms of the will were not followed. So the plan in the upper corner on the right is the plan by Elwood Allen, who was hired by the trustees to develop the park's master plan. So the park opened in 1954 and was run by a private corporation for the benefit of the county's residents for approximately 20 years. Included in the trustees were both representatives of the city and the county, executives at Reynolds, and then other prominent citizens. In 1958, the Robert Trent Jones Champion Golf Course was opened. The image of the smiling gentleman on the left is Robert Trent Jones. He was an English-American golf course architect who designed and redesigned more than 400 golf courses in 45 states and 35 countries. In reference to this, he took pride in saying, "The sun never sets on a Robert Trent Jones golf course." He attended Cornell University and customized a program of study that allowed him to pursue his interest in golf course design. He designed 9 holes there while he was a student and added the other 9 in 54. Tanglewood's course hosted the PGA Championship in 1974, and that magazine spread is an article about the championship that was held at Tanglewood. I believe Faye talked about her father being on the Tanglewood Beautification Committee, even though Tanglewood was not integrated. And it also does have an interesting connection to local civil rights history. The U.S. Department of Justice actually filed suit against the trustees to desegregate the park in 1978. And there was a settlement that made the park an asset of the William N. Reynolds Trust that generated income for the trust, which then leased the park to Tanglewood Park, Inc., which integrated the park in 1971. But then there was some threat that it would be developed into a residential community, somewhat like Bermuda Run in the mid-1970s. And so Forsyth County at that time purchased the park from the trustees to preclude the possibility of developing the park into a residential community. So the purchase was made possible with the donation of money from the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. And it was the first major park that became part of the Forsyth County recreation system. Prior to that, the county owned 1 or 2 small parcels, but nothing of the extent of Tanglewood. So that is the staff recommendation sorry, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the county marker. And if any of you have questions about that, I am certainly happy to take those.
Do we have an applicant for Tanglewood?
No, we did not get any applications for a county marker this year. So when that has happened in the past, we will come up with a recommendation. So like the Y camps of Salem Chapel Township were another recommendation as a study listed resource in the county, and Tanglewood is similarly, been determined eligible for the National Register. I'm not sure whether it's study listed, but certainly worthy of recognition.
And would I be somewhat correct in saying that it has been approximately 40 years since the white only clause was presented or was
the park was integrated in 1971, so that's 50 years ago this year.
Okay.
I like that reference, Heather. think that's an important part of the history, and it rounds out the story.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of very important history, but that's a piece that's significant as well.
Yes.
I'm going to log off and come back on my phone. I'm having a little something going on here.
Okay, we're probably about ready to end.
Oh, okay. Right.
If you could hang on for
shaking a little bit. Okay.
For 2 more seconds.
Okay.
So committee, what I need you to do then is score all of the applications from the city on the spreadsheets that I sent you and email those to me. I don't need really scores on the Tanglewood application, but please, if you have comments about the important aspects of the history that you think need to be included in the marker text so that we can work then with those of you who are on the commission in drafting that text, send those thoughts to me and you can say just yes or no, we think Tanglewood qualifies for a marker, and that will be sufficient.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
I just wanted to confirm, it seemed like, and I thought I'd reviewed them accurately, are there 2 applicants that are willing to self-fund?
I do not have that list in front of me, but I can confirm that.
Okay.
But please score the applications without regard to the willingness. Yeah, without regard to the willingness or ability to self-fund.
Oh, this one's going to be so hard because they're all so fabulous.
I know, so many. So please, those of you who are still on the call, the city markers have gotten so competitive. One of our ones we awarded last year came in 5 years in a row. So please recognize that if you're not awarded one this year, please continue to bring your applications forward because all of these sites are worthy of a marker.
They're really phenomenal, and I continue to be astounded.
Yes.
The importance of the history of our community that has been unsung.
Yes.
And I think it's great.
Me too. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, committee members. Thank you, applicants, for taking time out of your evenings to be on this Zoom with us. And we will be in touch with all of you all tomorrow. Good night.
Good night,
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.